Shalom, and welcome to Hebrew Bible Secrets with your host, Rabbi Beaton. We are reading today from the book of Mark, starting at chapter 15. Mark, chapter 15, verse 1. 1. And straightway in the morning, the chief Kohanim held a consultation with the elders and experts in the Torah and the whole Sanhedrin, and bound Yahushua and carried him away and handed him to Platus. 2. And Platus asked him, Are you the king of the Yehudim? And he answering to him, You just said it. 3. And the chief Kohanim accused him of many things, but he answered nothing. 4. And Platus asked him again, saying, Do you have nothing to say? Behold, how many things they testify against you. 5. But Yahushua answered nothing, so that Platus marveled. 6. Now at the Karg, he released to them one prisoner, whomever they desired. 7. And there was one named Yahushua bar Abba, which lay bound with them, that had made insurrection with him, who had committed murder in the insurrection. 8. And the multitude, crying aloud, began to desire him to do as he had ever done to them. 9. But Platus answered them, saying, Would you like me to release to you the king of the Yehudim? 10. For he knew that the chief Kohanim had handed him over for envy. 11. But the chief Kohanim urged the people that he should rather release Yahushua bar Abba to them. 12. And Platus answered and said again to them, What will you then desire that I should do to him whom you call the king of the Yehudim? 13. And they cried out again, Hang him. 14. Then Platus said to them, Why, what evil has he done? And they cried out the more exceedingly, Hang him. 15. And so Platus, willing to please the people to avoid a riot, released Yahushua bar Abba to them, and handed over Yahushua, when he had scourged him to be impaled. 16. And the soldiers led him away into the hall called Praetorium, and they called together the whole battalion. 17. And they clothed him with a purple cloak, and plaited a crown of thorns, and put it upon his head. 18. And began to salute him, Hail, King of the Yehudim. 19. And they struck him on the head with a stick, and spat on him, and bowing their knees, pretending to pay homage to him. 20. And when they had mocked him, they took off the purple cloak from him, and put his own clothes on him, and led him out to impale him. 21. And they compelled one, Shimon, a Cyrenian, North African, who passed by, coming out of the field, the Av of Alexander and Rufus, to bear his execution stake. 22. And they brought him to the place, Golgoleth, which is, being interpreted, the place for counting heads. 23. And they gave him to drink wine mingled with myrrh, but he received it not. 24. And when they had impaled him, they parted his garments, casting lots upon them, what every man should take. 25. And it was the third watch, and they impaled him. 26. And the superscription of his accusation was written over Yahushua. Ha Notzari, we Hamelech, Ha Yehudim. 27. And with him they impaled two thieves, the one on his right hand, and the other on his left. 28. And the words of Yahweh were fulfilled, which said, And he was numbered with the transgressors. 29. And they that passed by railed on him, shaking their heads, and saying, Ha, you that would destroy the Beth, Abrahamic-Faith, the temple, and rebuild it in 3 days. 30. Rescue yourself and come down from the execution stake. 31. Likewise also, the chief Kohanim, mocking, said among themselves with the experts in the Torah, he rescued others, he cannot rescue himself. 32. Let Yahushua, the King of Israel, descend now from the execution stake, that we may see and believe. And they that were impaled with him reviled him. 33. And when the 6th hour had come, there was darkness over the whole land, even to the 9th hour. 34. And at the 9th hour, Yahushua cried with a loud voice, saying, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, lama, azab tani. That is to say, my El Yah, my El Yah, my mighty Yah, my mighty Yah, why have you kept me? 35. And some of them that stood by, when they heard it, said, behold, he calls Eliyahu. 36. And one ran and filled a sponge full of vinegar, and put it on a stick, and gave him to drink, saying, let him alone, let us see whether Eliyahu will come to take him down. 37. And Yahushua cried with a loud voice, and gave up his ruach, his spirit. 38. And the veil of the Beth Hamikdash, the temple, was torn in 2 pieces, from the top to the bottom. 39. And when the centurion, whom stood over against him, saw that he so cried out, and gave up the ruach, the spirit, he said, truly, this man was the son of Elohim. 40. There were also women looking on afar off, among whom was Miriam of Magdala, and Miriam the mother of Yaakov, and of Joseph, and Salome. 41. Who also, when he was in Galilee, followed him and served him, and many other women which came up with him to Jerusalem. 42. And now when the evening was come, because it was the preparation, that is, the day before the Sabbath. 43. Joseph of Arimathea, an honourable counsellor, which also waited for the kingdom of Elohim, came and went in boldly to Pilatus, and asked him for the body of Yahushua. 44. And Pilatus marvelled if he were already dead, and calling to him the centurion, he asked him whether he had been dead a while. 45. And when he knew it of the centurion, he gave the body to Joseph. 46. And he brought fine linen, and took him down, and wrapped him in the linen, and laid him in a tomb, which was cut out of rock, and rolled a stone to the door of the tomb. 47. And Miriam of Magdala, and Miriam the mother of Joseph, beheld where he was laid. So that brings us now to the end of chapter 15. So let's go back and have a look at some of the footnotes in chapter 15. So the first footnote we have is in chapter 6. Now at that Karg he released to them one prisoner, whomever they desired. So now at that Karg, let's have a look at that quickly. So the Karg being the celebration, okay, so feast day, celebration day. Okay, so let's go to the next footnote, which is in verse 22. And they brought him to the place Golgotha, which is, being interpreted, the place for counting heads. So let's have a look at this quickly. This was the place of the Mount of Olives, where the Mishkat altar was, and the term is from the Hebrew word pakad, which means to count heads. Here, the sons of Israel were counted and numbered. Okay, so it's the place for counting heads. So let's go to the next footnote, which is in verse 24. And when they impaled him, they parted his garments, casting lots upon them, what every man should take. So we have a footnote here, and it reads, the writer tried to show fulfillment of Psalm 22:18 in Yahshua the Messiah. So let's have a look at Psalm 22:18. So Psalm 22:18 reads, they parted my garments among them and cast lots upon my vesture. Okay, so that's Psalm 22:18. So let's go to the next footnote, which is in verse 25. And it was the third watch, and they impaled him. Okay, so let's have a look at this. And it was the third watch. So we have here not exactly 9 a.m. as wrongly assumed, but 12 p.m. to 3 p.m. time period. Mark is not defining an exact time when the impalement took place, but people have assumed this incorrectly. The Hebrew time was defined in 3 hourly watches of 4 segments in a 12-hour cycle. This is in complete harmony with John 19:12, where he also mentions Yahshua being ready but not impaled until after 12 noon. Mark, therefore, by saying the third watch, is giving us a time frame of when he was hung on the tree. Note, both Mark and John were Hebrew writing for Hebrew people and for Israel, and not for the Romans, who were their enemies. The Gentiles have to come into Israel to receive their instructions and understanding. The Hebrew people divided the full 24-hour day from sunrise to sunrise into 2 slots of about 12 hours each. This was then further divided into 4 watches, each of 3-hour segments. Therefore, both John and Mark are in agreement when one understands this fact. There were no time clocks or watches as today, but time was measured by sundials around the 1st century in Israel. So we get an approximation of time. So you could have a look at Exodus 14:24, Judges 7:19, 2 Samuel 13:34, and 2 Kings 11:5. So let's have a look at the second one. So Judges 7:19. Let's have a look at that. So Judges 7:19 reads, so Beaton and the 100 men that were with him came to the outside of the camp in the beginning of the middle watch, and they had but newly set the watch, and they blew the shofarim and broke the jars that were in their hands. Okay, so there you can read beginning of the middle watch, and they had but newly set the watch. Okay, so let's have a look at Samuel 13:34. So 2 Samuel 13:34 reads, but Absalom fled. The young man that kept the watch lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, there came much people by the way of the hillside behind him. Okay, so you have there the young man that kept the watch. Okay, so that's another reference to the watch. So let's have a look now at 2 Kings 11:5. So 2 Kings 11:5. And he commanded them, saying, this is the thing that you shall do. A third part of you that enter in on the Sabbath shall even be keepers of the watch of the king's house. Okay, so there you have another reference to the watch. Okay, so let's read on. So we have a little bit more here. So the third hour or third watch of the day is 12 p.m. onwards to approximately 3 p.m. The 6th hour or third watch, 12 p.m. to 3 p.m. Mark new watches. Check Mark 6:48. Whoever translated this gospel from the Hebrew confused the term into hours, while Mark never described an exact hour. So the 9th hour or fourth watch is 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. So we have also a chart which tells us the third watch, which falls between 12 p.m. and 3 p.m. And you can reference that with Mark 15:25 and John 19:14. We also have the 6th hour, which is third watch, which falls between 12 p.m. and 3 p.m. And for that you can reference Mark 15:33. And we have the 9th hour is really the fourth and last watch of the day, from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. And then a new day starts at sunset. And this can also be referenced in Mark 15:34. Okay, so let's go to the next footnote, which is in verse 26. And the superscription of his accusation was written over Yahushua, Ha Notzari Uyamelech Ha Yahudim. So let's have a look at this, Ha Yahudim. So in Hebrew, the acronym formed was Yud, Hey, Wav, and Hey, forming Yahweh, which the Hebrew people objected to, as the name was set apart to them. Okay, so they weren't allowed to use that name at the time, so anybody obviously using that name and calling themselves that name obviously is going to be blasphemy. So that's why it was a severe charge by the people, because they had stopped using the name. Okay, so let's go to the next footnote, which is in verse 27. And with him they impaled two thieves, the one on his right hand and the other on his left. So let's have a look at this. On the same tree, the almond tree, see footnote Luke 23:33. Okay, so if you want to look at that reference, go to Luke 23:33. Okay, so let's go to the next footnote, which is verse 28. And the words of Yahweh were fulfilled, which said, and he was numbered with the transgressors. So let's have a look at these transgressors. So we have from Isaiah 53:12. This verse was not in the early manuscripts, but you can read it if you want to from Isaiah 53:12. Okay? So let's go to the next footnote, which is in verse 33. And when the 6th hour had come, there was darkness over the whole land, even to the 9th hour. Okay, let's have a look at this, to the 9th hour. So the 6th hour to the 9th hour would be between the two time frames, 12 p.m. and 3 p.m. and 3 p.m. and 6 p.m. time frame. This is a time frame. So darkness was over the land. Please note, a scribe has obviously converted Mark's watches, confusing them into hours. Okay? So let's go to the next footnote in verse 34. And at the 9th hour, Yahushua cried with a loud voice, saying, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, lama sabachthani. So let's have a look at this. Sabachthani. So we have here, Yahushua spoke in Hebrew. See footnote, Matthew 27, 46. Let's have a quick look at Matthew 27:46. So Matthew 27:46 reads, "And about the 9th hour, Yahushua cried with a loud voice, saying, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, lama azavtani. That is to say, my El, Yahweh, my El, Yahweh, why have you kept me?" Okay, so we have a couple of footnotes here, so let's have a look at the first footnote. So we have a footnote here under as Avtani. So from Tefillin, Psalms 22:1, the words are in Hebrew. That is why the people thought Yahushua was calling on Eliyahu. Okay? So the next one we have there is, that is to say, my El, Yahweh. So we have a footnote here, and it reads, El means the mighty one, and Yah or Yahu both are the short forms of the set-apart name of Elohim, seen many times in scriptures, such as Psalms 68:4. Because Yahushua said Eliyahu, many thought he was calling out to Elijah, which is seen in the text verse, though he was not calling out to Elijah. Okay? So we have another footnote here. Why have you kept me? So let's have a look at this. The word in Aramaic more accurately means kept and not forsaken. Okay, so let's go to the next footnote, which is a continuation. My mighty Yah, why have you kept me? Okay, so let's have a look at this. So the Greek word egka talipo, Strong's Concordance G1459, more correctly means to keep someone waiting and not forsaken. Okay, so let's go to the next footnote, which we have in verse 42. And now when the evening was come, because it was the preparation, that is, the day before the Sabbath. So let's have a look at this, day before the Sabbath. So approaching Aviv 14 to move forward to Aviv 15, which would be the annual Sabbath. Okay? So let's go to the next footnote, which is in verse 43. So Joseph of Ramathaim, Arimathea. So let's have a look at this, Ramathaim. So the great uncle of Yahushua. Okay? So Joseph of Ramathaim, Arimathea, was the great uncle of Yahushua. Okay, so let's go to the next footnote, which is in verse 44. And Platos marveled if he were already dead, and calling to him the centurion, he asked him whether he had been dead a while. So we have here, Pilate marveled because Yahushua was stoned and bled to death, while Pilate expected him to survive a couple of days, which was normal for victims. This reveals Yahushua, the Messiah, was stoned to death after being on the tree. Okay? So, now let's go to the last footnote, which is in verse 46. And he brought fine linen, and took him down, and wrapped him in the linen, and laid him in a tomb. So we've got a footnote for tomb. So we have here, on the Mount of Olives. So this tomb was on the Mount of Olives. Okay? So that now brings us to the end of chapter 15. And I thank you for watching, and I hope to see you on the other side. This is Rabbi Beaton saying thank you for watching. Baruch Shem, Kivod Malkuto, Leolam Va'ed. Benevolent be the name of his esteemed kingdom, forever and ever and ever. Amen.